Hey, what's up? Welcome. You are listening to TC the G Radio Season 2, Episode 10. I am TC the G, broadcasting directly from Tijuana, Baja California. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to have a great time. The topic of conversation for today's broadcast sexual violence. I want to dedicate this episode to the person who suggested this topic to me, Carla Gutierrez. Thank you so much for this suggestion. I think it's going to be a great one. Saludos, Carla. So, what is sexual violence? So, I did some research. I researched this thing up. So, sexual violence came back as sexual exploitation, abuse, or harassment. So, it could be any of these, right? So, I went to this website and I want to read this to you guys as to what sexual harassment is in the guidelines of the EEOC. Now, the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now, this one is only talking about sexual harassment, okay? It follows to say sexual harassment includes many things. It says actual or attempted rape or sexual assault, unwanted pressure for sexual favors, unwanted deliberate touching, leaning over, cornering, or pinching, unwanted sexual looks or gestures, unwanted letters, telephone calls, or materials of a sexual nature, unwanted pressure for dates, unwanted sexual teasing, jokes, remarks, or questions, referring to an adult as a girl, hunk, doll, babe, or honey, whistling at someone, cat calls, sexual comments, turning work discussions to sexual topics, sexual innuendos or stories, asking about sexual fantasies, preferences, or history, personal questions about social or sexual life, sexual comments about a person's clothing, anatomy, or looks, telling lies or spreading rumors about a person's personal sex life, neck massage, touching an employee's clothing, hair, or body, giving personal gifts, hanging around a person, hugging, kissing, patting, or stroking, um, touching or rubbing oneself sexually around another person, standing close or brushing up against a person, looking a person up and down, elevator eyes, staring at someone, sexually suggestive signals, facial expressions, winking, throwing kisses or licking lips, making sexual gestures with hands or through body movements. Now that's a lot, right? And I'm sorry I had to put you guys through all of that. But I think it's very important for us to kind of like hit these things, like these points. There is more. Now this list goes on. It has like a verbal, nonverbal, physical. But it's pretty much all the same, right? I think we all get the point. I think some of the ones that I said kind of like fall in one of these categories. Um, but overall, it says sexual harassment is a behavior. It is defined as unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature. Okay? So it's unwelcome. So meaning the person did not ask for it, right? It's um just without it being asked for, right? Like there was no consensual part of it. It just kind of like the person is just throwing these things out there. The one who, I guess the abuser is just throwing these things out there. Now, I was listening to a podcast last night and with Tony A. the Wizard, and one of his points were that some people that are abused, they don't speak up. They speak up like a year later. And I guess what he was trying to say is that when you wait that long, it kind of makes you doubt that it was true. Now, if you've been a victim of sexual abuse, you kind of understand that that's not true. Sometimes you stay quiet for many reasons, mostly scared. People are scared. So I also researched another website, and this one is called Sexual Violence Myths and Misconceptions. So these are myths, right? So this one says myth. There is no reason for a victim not to report being raped to law enforcement, right? Like there's no reason to. You should go. You should have done it. That's the myth. Well, the fact is, rape is the least reported and convicted violence crime in the U.S. There are many reasons why victims may choose not to report to law enforcement or tell anyone about what happened to him or her. Some include concern for not being believed, fear of the attackers getting back at him or her, embarrassment or shame, fear of being blamed, pressure from others not to tell, distrust of law enforcement, belief that there is not enough evidence, desire to protect the attacker. Now, there is like this kind of made me think about there's this one I forget what it's called, but there's like this one kind of like I think it's like a syndrome or something like that when the victim kind of like starts protecting the abuser, like they fall in love with him. um I forget what it's called. I wish I could have looked that up. But yeah, so the victim starts, feeling sorry for the perpetrator, starts feeling like kind of like they love them at this point, right? So this is something that's it's easy to say, oh, you should have, done you should have just spoken up. A lot of the times, people don't even have people around to even encourage them to speak up. Maybe they have never been spoken to about sexual abuse. I mean, I'm pretty sure, somehow, somewhere we hear these things, maybe. But there's some people that grow up in very abusive environments. So they grew up thinking that they cannot speak up because they'll be in trouble and they'll be punished, they won't be believed. So I ended up going back and I did the research, right? I researched what this syndrome was, and it says that it's called the Stockholm syndrome. So it says it's an emotional response, it's a coping mechanism to a captive or abusive situation. People develop positive feelings toward their captors or abusers. So it's saying it's a coping mechanism. So that means it's like a way of the mind to adapt to the situation in order to survive, right? So these kind of, I guess, it's like a defense mechanism for the body to go through it and not suffer, right? To kind of like lessen the suffering. Now, so the people like, for example, like the people that are like, that have the syndrome, it shows here like what they'll do is they'll start focusing on the positive things, right? Like, for example, like they give, like the abuser gives them food, right? Maybe it's a little bit of food, just enough to keep them alive, but they'll focus on that. Oh, but he fed me, right? He fed me, even though he had her captive or, kidnapped. And I think this is kind of like when you're in an abusive relationship, right? Like you just look at the good things, but you kind of don't look at the other things that are not healthy, like the other actions that are not healthy. For example, like, oh, but he bought me flowers yesterday, versus all the abuse and all the pain he puts you through every other day. Like they just focus on the good things. And again, this is in order to adapt and to survive the situation, which is not healthy, right? And I think a lot of these things that happen, they actually happen to people who don't have like a strong mental, right? Like maybe they were abused as children, they weren't given the safe space to speak up, to say what, to feel safe enough to, if something happens, like their parents telling them, if something happens to you, tell me, speak up, don't be scared, don't be embarrassed. Like a lot of people don't even have that safe space. Like for example, me, when I was growing up, my mom, like I told you guys before, she used to work at Tacahuila. So a couple of her boyfriends, a couple of them molested me. Now there was this one guy that he's the one that took her to the States and took all of us to the States when I was in fourth grade. I'm sorry, about to be in fifth grade. So first I went to the States when I was in third grade. We went to Inglewood, but there was no space at the school, so I had to come back to Tijuana. And then we went back again when I was going to start fifth grade. Now, when we went back to Whittier. And we went back with this guy, right? And he abused me. He sexually abused me. Um, there was no like penetration or anything, but he touched me, right? He touched me, and I told my mom about it. And what she said to me when I told her that was that she wasn't gonna lose because he was about to move us from a little one room. He was gonna move us into like an actual like a mobile home or something like that, or like an apartment. I'm sorry, an apartment. So she was like, I'm not gonna lose what we have, the house that we're gonna get or the apartment that we're gonna get because of what you're saying. And she said, and you should have told me earlier, you know? So it's like, why does it matter when I told you? You know, it shouldn't matter when your kids tell you that these things happen. It shouldn't matter. And the whole thing that I'm not gonna lose, what I have coming because of what you're saying. Like, some people don't have that space. Some people don't grow up with parents that are good enough parents, right? These are parents that are like low life, like low. They don't really care about their kids, honestly. That person probably doesn't care about themselves to begin with, right? Like they don't love themselves or they don't love their kids. But at the end of the day, as a child, you don't feel safe. You don't feel like you're in a safe space, right? Like, like again, she should not have said. You should have told me that earlier. Like, again, why does it matter when your kids tell you? Like, you should always take your kid's side. You should always try to find out what happened, when, how, and do something about it, right? Not worry about losing what you have coming. Like, that's the kind of scenarios that I went through. So the kind of scenario that I went through. So I know there's gonna be other people that have gone through the same thing as me, because I'm not the only one, right? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of cases out there similar, very similar. So this is what I mean when I say, some people don't grow up in places where they can actually feel like they are believed, that they are trusted to, that they feel like the people around are going to do something about it. Uh, so like back to the Tony thing, like one of the things that he was saying was that, like he was talking about how some victims, they 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 tell you about the situation like a year after. So it's like he's saying, like, if you wait that long, you kind of lose credibility, right? That's kind of like what he was saying. But again, there's these reasons that like the ones that I'm saying, that why some people don't speak up until years later, so but again, in the show, he's very open to learning and understanding, because he said, we're trying to understand why is it that happens? Why do some people wait so long to speak up? But again, it doesn't matter how long the people wait. They shouldn't lose credibility because of the time, right? We should at least listen and see what they have to say and do some kind of investigation and see how we can help, not just stay quiet. And again, or not brush them off and be like, you should have told me that earlier. Like, that's horrible. That's horrible. That's actually like kind of like being on the perpetrator side, right? Now, if the person is lying, and was, well, then yeah, right. There's gotta be done something about people who lie about that too, because that's not right. And I know there's some kids too that lie as well. But again, you at the end of the day, when a child is speaking up and trying to say something, we should listen. We should listen. We should definitely listen. And we know our people. We know our people. As people, we know our people. We know our kids. We know what they're like. So it's not to be it's not to be taken lightly when things like this pop up. It's to be taken very with in a delicate manner. So I really do think that we need to pay more attention to our children, to our surroundings, give kids safe spaces, give grown-ups safe spaces as well, because again, some of these people have grown up in environments like mine where we're not really believed, where there's no safe space to really go to in case something does happen. And it's unfortunate, because we should be able to support each other and have each other's back at the end of the day. We need to empower people to speak up and to take care and to not be scared of speaking up against these things. And a lot of these things happen at work as well, Just overall, there needs to be respect. And of course, sometimes we joke around with our coworkers and things like that, but that's different, right? We know when it's like there's a joke between people that actually that are friends, and just people who are like aventando del calzón kind of thing, that they're just like there to sexually give you sexual hints and things like that. So I really do want to, give the message of empowering our children, empowering everybody to speak up and create safe spaces, because that's the only way we're going to be able to have each other's backs and stand up against these people. And we need to keep in mind as well that a lot of these things do not just happen to women. A lot of the times they also happen to men. Maybe the majority is women, but it also happens to men, to boys. So we need to have an open mind and not, there's like a machismo kind of thing where boys don't want to speak up when these things happen to them because they lose their masculinity. But we cannot make them feel like that. We have to make them feel safe, because just because they're boys, because they're men, it doesn't mean that doesn't happen to them. That doesn't make any sense. Just because you're a boy, you're a man, it doesn't happen to you. No, it happens. It happens to a lot of these boys and men. And we need to also make them feel safe and valued enough that they can come to us and tell us if any of these things are happening to them. They need to feel safe. We're not going to make fun of them. We're not going to make them feel any less of a man. Most definitely, we need to keep that in mind. And it also kind of goes back, well, kind of switching gears here, but it also got me thinking about how some girls get pimped, right? They get pimped by guys, and it kind of has to do this, it kind of is the same. It has kind of like the same kind of background story, and so people can say like, oh, well, they like that. Well, some kids get brainwashed, or again, they have that syndrome where they end up like caring for the pimp, and but in reality, that's not healthy. It's not healthy. Nobody in their right mind is gonna give their money to somebody else. Money that they have earned themselves, they're not going to donate it to somebody else unless there's something else going on there, right? So we need to really keep an eye out for that as well. And, just keep ourselves protected, keep ourselves, um, give ourselves again that safe space and trust each other and empower each other, because some people, it takes courage. It takes courage to speak up. More than anything, it's courage. And to have courage, it takes a lot of guts. Like, it takes a lot to be courageous. And we live in a society that's full of fear. So we cannot expect, you know, like we have to be realistic as well, right? Like we don't live in a society of courageous people. We live in a society of fearful people. So those of us who are courageous, we need to speak up and stand up for these other people. We need to have platforms like this one, and give people again the safe space to speak up and feel loved and that they're going to be heard and believed. Thank you so much for tuning in to TC the G Radio. I hope you enjoyed this episode. What are your thoughts on today's topic of conversation, sexual violence? Let me know. Comment, like, share, and subscribe. Remember to tune in to TC the G Radio every Thursday at 11:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, connect with me on social media to get more of me and my music. I will leave all of my social media and contact info in the video's description. Again, thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in and for allowing me to share this time with you. Take care. Saludos.